In the heart of Upper Manhattan, the sun was setting on a humid Tuesday in mid-August of 1934. Around 7:30 p.m., Bumpy Johnson arrived at the front doors of the Silver Palace on 135th Street. He looked sharp in a charcoal gray suit that cost him a small fortune from his street lottery profits. His shirt was snow white with silver links, and his leather boots were buffed to a high shine that caught the glow of the gas lamps. He was dressed just as elegantly as any rich banker who traveled uptown to visit the neighborhood's most legendary jazz spot. This was the place where jazz legends found their fame and big bands played to packed rooms. It was a venue where wealthy folks from the city's lower districts came to drink and watch talented local performers. Yet, it was also a place with a cruel rule. The people who lived in the neighborhood and created the music weren't allowed to sit in the crowd. Only the staff and the musicians were black. The audience remained strictly white. Bumpy was there because an investor named Isaac Goldstein had asked for a sit-down. Isaac ran several legal shops in the area and thought the Silver Palace would be a quiet spot to talk about a secret deal. Isaac assumed that Bumpy's reputation was so massive that the club's rules wouldn't apply to him. He was mistaken. As Bumpy walked toward the door, a massive security guard named Arthur Miller stood in his way. Miller acted as the gatekeeper, deciding who was worthy of entry with a single look. He stepped forward, using his heavy frame to wall off the entrance. His voice boomed loud enough for everyone on the sidewalk to hear. "Hold it right there, pal," Miller sneered. "You've got the wrong idea. This place is for white guests only. We don't take your kind unless you're carrying a tray or playing an instrument. Get back to your own side of town and quit trying to push in where you aren't invited. Keep moving before I get the cops over here to toss you in jail for hanging around," Miller barked. Bumpy stopped in his tracks and studied the guard's face. He saw a man who felt completely safe in his bigotry, backed by a system that allowed a simple doorman to reject any person of color, no matter their status. Bumpy realized right away that this wasn't even personal. Miller likely had no clue he was standing face to face with the most influential figure in the local underworld. To Miller, Bumpy was just another face that didn't belong. The disrespect was about the logic of the Silver Palace. The idea that white crowds could visit a black neighborhood to enjoy black music and be waited on by black hands, all while banning those same people from sitting at a table. It was about making money off a culture while keeping the people who built it in the position of servants. Behind Bumpy, the crowd of white guests watched the scene. Some looked entertained, others looked slightly awkward, but many clearly approved. They were all waiting to see if this stylish man would cause a scene, or if he would just walk away quietly like he was expected to. Bumpy could feel their stares and hear the hushed, nasty remarks about troublemakers who didn't know their place. He knew that shouting would be a mistake. It would only give the crowd a show and end with him in handcuffs or bleeding in an alley. It would just be a funny story for these people to tell later. So, Bumpy did something incredibly difficult. He stayed perfectly calm. He let a small, chilly grin spread across his face. The kind of look that said he was burning Miller's features into his memory for later. He stared directly into Miller's eyes for 3 long seconds. It lasted just long enough for the guard's confidence to waver, replaced by a sudden, nervous feeling that he had just made a very dangerous mistake. Bumpy gave a single, sharp nod, a silent motion that might have looked like giving in, but carried a much heavier meaning. He turned his back on the Silver Palace and strolled down 135th Street towards 7th Avenue. He kept his head high and his stride steady, refusing to show the onlookers that he felt even a hint of shame from the public snub. For the next quarter of an hour, he wandered through the neighborhood's evening bustle. He wasn't heading anywhere in particular. He just needed the air to cool his temper so he could plan his next move with a clear head. Eventually, he stopped in front of the Moonlight Ballroom near 138th Street. He watched the local crowd, laborers, doctors, and young couples, flowing through the doors of a place that actually wanted them. It was a spot run by people who lived there, offering a night out without the sting of being treated like a second-class citizen or a criminal. As he stood on the sidewalk, Bumpy had an epiphany that would eventually flip the entire neighborhood's economy on its head. The Silver Palace sat right in the heart of their community, on a local street, using local talent and local workers to rake in a fortune from outsiders. Even though the club lived off the neighborhood's vibe and skills, it was controlled by outside interests who played by their own biased rules. They were draining the community's wealth and exploiting its art, returning nothing but tiny paychecks to the few people they were forced to hire. Bumpy realized this lopsided setup only worked because the neighborhood hadn't yet found a way to flex its own muscles. The club owners figured they could keep their whites-only signs up forever because they didn't think anyone could stop them. They assumed the local residents were powerless to change the status quo. The owners of the Silver Palace were betting on the fact that the community was trapped. Local jazz players couldn't afford to walk away from the stage, and the kitchen staff couldn't quit their posts during the height of the Great Depression when every nickel counted. The bosses felt safe behind their wealthy fans and crooked politicians. They believed no single person could touch an institution as big as theirs. However, they hadn't planned for a man like Bumpy Johnson. They didn't realize that a man with his massive bankroll and deep reach might take a personal insult and turn it into a full-scale financial siege. Bumpy wasn't looking to start a street fight. He was planning to make their bigotry so expensive that the club would either have to open its doors to everyone or go bankrupt. Bumpy stepped into a phone booth at the corner of 7th Avenue and 139th Street. He dropped his coins and made 3 specific calls to get his engine running. First, he rang up his sharpest legal mind and right-hand man, Marcus, the Brain, Sterling. Second, he called Madam Queenie, the legendary boss of the local numbers game who had taught Bumpy everything he knew about the streets. Finally, he reached out to Reverend Samuel Heights, the leader of the city's largest congregation. The Reverend had spent his life preaching against unfairness, but he lacked the muscle Bumpy could provide to actually break the system. By the time the clock struck 12, Bumpy had gathered a diverse group of 15 influential people in the smoke-filled back room of a hidden lounge on 131st Street. The room held his best enforcers, rival gambling bosses, labor leaders who looked after the service workers, and even high society professionals like surgeons and attorneys who were tired of being looked down upon. Standing at the front of the room, Bumpy recounted the doorman's insults in a low, steady whisper that forced everyone to stay silent to catch every word. As he spoke, the mood in the room shifted. The initial confusion turned into a burning resentment, and finally into a sharp, hungry focus. They weren't just listening to a story of a man being stopped at a door, they were hearing the blueprint for a revolution. Everyone in the room realized that if Bumpy Johnson had pulled this specific group together, he wasn't just looking to settle a petty grudge. He was planning a total overhaul of the way things worked. "The Silver Palace kicked me out tonight," Bumpy told them. His voice was low and steady, vibrating with a controlled heat that was far more terrifying than a scream. "They did it because of the color of my skin. That guard called me boy and told me to get back to my own neighborhood. The funny thing is, that club is sitting right on 135th Street. It's right in our backyard." He looked around the table, catching the eyes of the leaders gathered there. "That place runs on our rhythm. It uses our horn players, our servers, our chefs, and our janitors. It builds its fortune on the fact that it's located in the heart of our community and showcases our art. But it slams the door on our faces when we try to be guests. They steal our creativity, our hard work, and our neighborhood's name, giving us back nothing but pocket change and the chance to wait on people who think we aren't good enough to sit next to them." Many people in the room nodded slowly. They had all felt that same sting before. They knew the Silver Palace was just one example of a much bigger problem where outsiders got rich off their culture while keeping them in the role of the servant. "But those owners have a blind spot," Bumpy said, his voice becoming a whisper that pulled everyone closer. "They don't realize how weak they actually are. That club cannot move a single inch without our people. Every person who keeps that place running looks like us. They also rely on the thrill of coming to a black neighborhood to see a black show. Most importantly, they rely on us being quiet. They think we'll just sit back and let them treat us like trash in our own home without ever fighting back." Bumpy stood up and began to walk slowly behind the chairs, the air in the room thick with his resolve. "We are going to show the men who run the Silver Palace that there is a heavy price to pay for taking our money while spitting on our people. We aren't going to set a fire or break windows. We're going to do something much more effective." Burning the building down would just give them a big insurance check and make them look like victims, Bumpy explained. And we aren't going to touch the guests. That would only give the precinct an excuse to raid our homes and crack down on our businesses. Instead, we're going to make running that club a living nightmare. We'll make it so pricey and so stressful that the owners will have to make a choice. They either let our people in as equals, or they sell the keys to black businessmen who will. One way or another, the days of them getting rich while keeping us on the outside are finished. For the next 2 hours, the group mapped out a multi-layered attack. It was a mix of union tactics, money moves, and the kind of quiet pressure that only the streets know how to apply without leaving fingerprints for the law to find. They broke the plan into 3 main strikes. 1. The inside squeeze. Every black worker at the Silver Palace was going to be brought into the fold. The band would start demanding much higher pay and better treatment, with the threat of walking off the stage right before a big show. Meanwhile, the wait staff and cooks were instructed to perform a slow walk. They wouldn't break anything or be rude, but drinks would take forever to arrive and meals would come out cold. The goal was to frustrate the wealthy guests and tank the club's reputation until the profits started to bleed out. 2. Cutting the vitals. The club needed a constant flow of steak, high-end booze, and fresh laundry to stay open. Bumpy and Madam Queenie decided to have a chat with the local vendors. These suppliers were given a simple ultimatum: stop delivering to the Silver Palace, or lose every other contract you have in this neighborhood. Since the rest of the neighborhood's business was worth way more than one club, the vendors would have to hike their prices for the Silver Palace or cut them off entirely, leaving the club scrambling for supplies at double the cost. 3. The public spotlight. Reverend Heights and other local leaders would turn the Silver Palace's name into a dirty word from every pulpit in town. They would make sure everyone in the community, and the press, knew exactly how the club treated its neighbors. By making the racism loud and public, they would strip away the glamour of the venue. They didn't need to stop the white guests from coming, they just needed to make the owners feel the heat from every direction. The goal wasn't necessarily to keep the downtown crowd away. Bumpy knew they would follow their own whims. He just wanted to make the club's bias so famous and so controversial that the owners would be constantly embarrassed and forced to defend the indefensible. 4. The paperwork trap. Bumpy also used his friends in high places to pull some strings with local inspectors. Suddenly, the Silver Palace was being hit with surprise health inspections that turned up minor issues requiring expensive repairs. Fire marshals showed up on busy nights to complain about exit signs, and the club's liquor license renewals got stuck in a mountain of red tape. None of this was enough to close them down, but it was like a swarm of mosquitoes. It was constant, it was annoying, and it cost a lot of money to make the problems go away. 5. Building the competition. Finally, Bumpy and Madam Queenie decided to put their own money into rival venues. They started backing clubs that welcomed everyone, making sure these spots had the best sound systems and the coolest atmosphere. They wanted to create a world where a black trumpet player could make more money at an integrated club than at the Silver Palace. If they could steal the talent, they could steal the customers. This was a brilliant, many-sided attack. It combined honest work like union organizing with the kind of shady pressure only Bumpy knew how to exert. For the first time, the neighborhood was using its secret muscle not just to fill its own pockets, but to fix a social wrong. They were proving that the powerless actually held all the cards. The war officially started on Monday, September 23rd. The opening shot was fired by the club's biggest star, the legendary bandleader who had practically built the Silver Palace's reputation. He walked into the manager's office and dropped a bombshell. He wanted a 50% raise for every man in his orchestra. He also demanded better meals, cleaner dressing rooms, and a total change in how the management spoke to his players. The management was stunned. They didn't realize this was just the beginning of a very long, very expensive month. When the bosses tried to play hardball, reminding the bandleader that he was signed to a deal for another 6 months, he didn't blink. He told them flat out that contracts were just paper and that he already had several massive offers from other clubs that made his current salary look like pocket change. This wasn't a bluff. Bumpy and Madam Queenie had made sure those offers were real and waiting for him. The musician, who was tired of being treated like a second-class citizen by the club's owners, was more than happy to use this leverage to break his chains. While the management was sweating over their star attraction, the rest of the building started to fall apart from the inside. In the kitchen, the cooks moved like they were walking through molasses. They claimed they were just being extra careful with food safety, but the reality was a coordinated slowdown. Orders that used to take 10 minutes now took 40, leaving the wealthy guests upstairs hungry and irritable. Out on the floor, the wait staff suddenly became clumsy. Drinks were forgotten, the wrong steaks were delivered to the wrong tables, and getting the bill felt like pulling teeth. It was a masterpiece of subtle sabotage, nothing blatant enough to get someone fired, but just enough to make the evening a headache for the high society crowd. Things were even worse at the loading dock. Delivery trucks started having engine trouble, or getting lost on their way to the club. Fresh produce and top-shelf liquor that should have arrived on a Monday didn't show up until Thursday. To keep the bar stocked, the managers had to scramble to find new suppliers who charged double for last-minute deliveries. By the middle of the second week, the owners were drowning in a sea of bad luck they couldn't explain. Their profits were leaking out of every seam. Their biggest star was halfway out the door, labor costs were skyrocketing as they tried to bribe essential staff to stay, and the supply chain was a mess. To top it off, the city inspectors were suddenly everywhere. The health department decided the kitchen needed a total overhaul, and the fire marshal showed up with a clipboard, insisting that new emergency exits had to be knocked through the walls immediately. The Silver Palace was being squeezed from every side, and the owners were starting to realize that someone was behind the curtain pulling the strings. The legal department even started snooping around, questioning whether the club's paperwork was actually in order. The owner of the Silver Palace, a man named Leo Rossi, a powerful white mobster who had made millions during Prohibition, knew this wasn't just a string of bad luck. He was savvy enough to realize a professional was pulling the strings. Rossi had deep pockets, political friends, and his own crew of enforcers. Usually, he could just lean on someone to make a problem vanish. But as he started asking around the city's underworld to find out who was responsible, he kept hearing one name over and over: Bumpy Johnson. When Rossi reached out to his fellow mob bosses to ask them to put a leash on Bumpy, he hit a wall. None of the downtown gangsters wanted to get involved in a fight over a neighborhood dispute in a part of town where they had no real footprint. They knew that in his own territory, Bumpy was far more influential and better protected than any outsider. By the third week of October, the costs were getting out of control. Rossi finally got a message inviting him to a sit-down with Marcus Sterling, the lawyer who represented several major Harlem interests. Hoping to find a way out of the mess, Rossi agreed to the meeting. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Rossi sat in Sterling's office. The lawyer didn't mince words. "Mr. Rossi," Sterling began, his voice calm and professional. "The headaches you've been dealing with at the Silver Palace are a coordinated response to your club's refusal to let black guests through the door. This policy is an insult to the entire neighborhood. It is especially offensive because your business sits right in the heart of this community and survives only because of black talent and black workers. The people who make your success possible have decided they won't stand for it anymore." "The chaos isn't going to stop," Sterling continued, his voice as smooth as glass. "In fact, it's going to get much worse until you publicly declare that the Silver Palace is open to everyone. You must welcome black guests and treat them with the exact same respect you show your white patrons. We expect to see proof that this change is real, not just a promise." Rossi's face turned a deep shade of red, his knuckles whitening as he gripped his chair. "Are you telling me that a bunch of locals are wrecking my bottom line? That Bumpy Johnson is behind this? I could have that man erased by sunrise. I have friends in every precinct and every neighborhood in this city. You think some street boss from uptown can shake me down?" Sterling didn't even blink. "Mr. Rossi, you are certainly free to try and go after Mr. Johnson if you think that's a smart move. But I should let you know that Bumpy has already planned for that. He's built a massive team of people, ministers, labor leaders and businessmen, who are all committed to this fight. If something happens to him, they won't stop, they'll just push harder to honor him." The lawyer leaned in slightly. "And really, you should ask yourself if this club is worth your life. If you choose violence, Bumpy will finish what you start. You'll find out very quickly that your connections, don't count for much once you step north of 110th Street. The threat hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Once Rossi's temper started to fade, the cold math of the situation took over. He realized that while he might be able to take Bumpy out, the cost would be astronomical. It would spark a bloody street war that would destroy his profits, bring every federal agent in the city down on his head, and leave the Silver Palace in ruins anyway. Even with Bumpy gone, the neighborhood was now organized, and they weren't going back to the old ways. Rossi was now facing the same grim math that had crushed other powerful bosses who tried to hold onto the neighborhood against Bumpy's iron will. He realized that declaring war on Bumpy in his own backyard was a losing game. It cost far more than any possible victory was worth. Bumpy had the streets, the shops, and the hearts of the people behind him, making him essentially untouchable in that part of town. "Give it to me straight. What do you want?" Rossi finally muttered, his voice dropping into a low growl as he accepted that this was now a business deal, not a street fight. Sterling slid a piece of paper across the mahogany desk. It was a draft of a public statement Rossi was expected to sign. It stated clearly that the Silver Palace would no longer use race as a reason to turn people away. The deal didn't force Rossi to go out and scout for local customers or change his flashy shows. It simply demanded that if a person of color walked up to the door, they were to be let in and treated with the same high-end service as anyone else. The agreement was airtight. The news would be spread through the local papers and shouted from the pulpits of every church in the district. To make sure Rossi wasn't just lying to get the heat off, prominent local leaders would be sent in as a test to see if the doors actually opened. If the club tried to fake it, the pressure would return 10 times harder. Rossi spent the next hour fighting over every word, trying to save face and keep his club's exclusive vibe while swallowing the bitter pill of integration. But by the end, he had no choice. On October 15, 1934, Leo Rossi released an official statement. He announced that the Silver Palace was turning a new leaf and would welcome all guests, regardless of their background. He promised that the old whites-only rule was dead and that every customer would be served with professional courtesy. The neighborhood was skeptical. Most people figured it was just a fancy PR stunt to make the accidents and the lawsuits go away. To see if the walls had truly come down, Marcus Sterling organized a test for the night of October 18th. A group of the community's most respected figures, surgeons, professors, and shop owners, all dressed in their finest evening wear, pulled up to the Silver Palace and walked toward the entrance for the late-night show. The security guard at the front, who had clearly been given a stern talk by the owners, didn't say a word as he opened the doors. The group was led to a table in the center of the room and treated with top-tier service. For the first time, they sat in the plush chairs of the Silver Palace's guests, watching the legendary bandleader perform from the audience instead of being stuck in the kitchen or behind the stage. News of the Silver Palace's surrender traveled like wildfire through the streets. People realized that if the most stubborn, whites-only club in the city could be broken, then no other place was safe. Over the next few months, Bumpy and his team took their blueprint to every other biased shop and lounge in the area. Some owners gave up the moment they saw Bumpy's lawyer walking toward them, knowing that a fight would only empty their bank accounts. Others tried to hold out, but they quickly fell victim to the same mysterious problems and rising costs that had ruined Leo Rossi's peace of mind. The victory at the Silver Palace was about much more than just getting a table at a fancy club. It proved a vital lesson that would shape the future of civil rights for the next 30 years. Economic muscle, when used correctly, can win battles that polite asking never could. The strategy Bumpy created, mixing worker strikes, cutting off supplies, and rallying the community into one giant fist, became a roadmap for activists in the decades to follow. By choosing to walk away quietly that night in 1935, Bumpy Johnson didn't just avoid a jail cell. He launched a financial war that changed the rules of the city forever. He didn't just get even, he got ahead, proving that the best way to beat a bully is to make their hate too expensive to afford. He proved that being told to get back to Harlem could actually be the spark that led to the community taking control of its own backyard. By forcing outside owners to either play fair or pack up, Bumpy showed that the neighborhood possessed a hidden strength that the power players downtown had completely ignored. Once that strength was organized, the old rules about who was allowed in and who was kept out were torn up for good. The doorman who started it all probably never realized his small-minded comment changed history. He likely kept his job after the doors opened to everyone, never grasping that his own arrogance was the match that lit the fire. He was just a small part of a big system of disrespect, but his words pushed the right man at the right time. The story of Bumpy's quiet walk away became a legend in the neighborhood. It was passed down through generations as a lesson. True power isn't always about a quick punch or a loud argument. Often, it's about having the patience to plan and the discipline to squeeze a broken system until it finally snaps. "You don't belong here," were the words meant to shrink Bumpy Johnson. But his response, walking away, planning carefully, and hitting them where it hurt, proved that belonging isn't a gift given by a man at a door. It is something people with enough brains and heart claim for themselves and their neighbors. That one insult didn't just hurt Bumpy, it changed the face of the city and broke the barriers of the most famous club in the world. That was the moment one man's personal slight transformed into a triumph for an entire neighborhood. The victory didn't come from a riot or a fire, but from the grueling, steady work of aligning people and money toward a single goal. It required the grit to stay patient and the focus to keep the pressure on until the elite realized that their prejudice was simply too expensive to keep. The Silver Palace finally opened its doors to everyone in late 1935 because Bumpy Johnson looked at a closed door and decided to build a bridge instead of a wall. By choosing a smart strategy over a quick temper and collective action over a lone vendetta, he set a standard for how to win. His choice to fight for lasting reform rather than just a moment of payback created a blueprint. It showed future generations exactly how to dismantle unfair systems by organizing their own power and hitting the status quo where it hurts most. The bank account.